Welcome to the People with Parents podcast, where we talk about, laugh about, and figure out the role reversal and ever-changing relationship between adult children and their parents. And now please, welcome your host, stand-up comedian, author, keynote speaker, and daughter with a capital D, Leanne Lord.
My guest today is friend and fellow comedian Bill McCarty. We've worked together for many years, particularly at the comic strip in New York City. He's a gifted comic, actor, and writer, but most relevantly for us, he's also a damn good son. Full disclosure, audio quality of this episode is a bit on the sketchy side. Done my best to increase Bill's volume and edit myself out, especially since this episode is about his journey with taking care of his 92-year-old mother, Marilyn, who is currently in a nursing home. He shares about how challenging this has been during the pandemic, about being an only child, seeing the signs of decline, the odyssey of paperwork, of the important things you need to have on hand, including a sense of humor. Please enjoy this stream of consciousness conversation with Bill McCarty. I reached out to you to be on the podcast because you have been more than kind to me as I've been going through my journey with my mom and my dad. And you've been very gentle in asking me questions and letting me ramble on and cry on your shoulder. That did not go unnoticed or underappreciated. So you have experience in this area, particularly, caring for your mom right now. So I really wanted you to bring your experience and share it with my audience.
Well, that's so sweet and kind of you. The thing I found in talking to you and in other people about our situations like that is it winds up being kind of a mutual therapy situation, for both people involved, which is also something I find going on very much with the whole coronavirus situation as well. We're all sort of taking care of each other throughout all this. And my mother is in a nursing home. She's been in, I guess I should back up. My mother wound up in a nursing home. She was living independently until she was 92. That's a good run. And with a lot of help from me, I'd visit her a couple of times a week and help her with errands and stuff. At about the point that she hit 92, the accumulating problems sort of caught up with her, the dementia that she had. Not quite Alzheimer's, but she had dementia, and there were physical issues, mainly involving just weakness and deterioration of her walking ability. And she'd been in rehab for some issues with her legs, and she got out and they said she was fine. And I went to visit her the next day and she was on the ground, and she'd been on the ground for a number of hours. After I'd spent several months making her apartment really livable, I called 911 and I just had this you probably had this during the course of dealing with your parents. I just had this moment of realizing that everything was changing in that moment. I just remember waiting for the ER to show up, the ER, the 911 workers, the ambulance, thinking my mother's lived in this apartment for 50 or so years and she's about to leave it for good, and she doesn't even know it. She was and she did. So she's been in a nursing home for about a year and a half. Okay. I would see her a couple of times a week, 2-3 times a week. She doesn't hate it there. There was like a big terrace fronting on a park, and she liked to sit on the terrace and look at the birds and the planes. There were things she liked about it, but I haven't seen her in about 2 months. The nursing homes went quarantine about a week or two before the rest of us did, until further notice. And they've had a number of deaths there. Obviously, it's quite stressful to not be able to go see her like that.
2 months. Is she lucid enough to talk on the phone?
She is. We tried to do a Zoom thing with her, or a face chat thing, but she didn't take to that. She didn't really understand it at all. Hearing is an issue with her. Hearing is very much an issue. And she has hearing aids. One of the things I don't know if you found this with your folks, the things you tell yourself about yourself become the way things are. My mother always believed that nothing ever worked for her. Nothing technological ever worked for her. Nothing going in the store, you couldn't get people to wait on you. And after a while, that becomes the case. She's had hearing aids for years, but she's never gotten used to the idea that when you have hearing aids, you're hearing things inside your head, not outside in the world. That, for some reason, she just never took to them. So talking to her on the phone is doable, but it's an effort. And you just sort of accept the fact that I get to hear her voice, she gets to hear my voice or Patricia's voice, my wife. And sometimes that's enough. If I don't quite get what she's saying, it's okay. She just knows we're there and we love her. The thing that's galling is if she really needs to hear me or hear somebody, she can hear. If she needs to hear, she can hear.
You haven't been able to see your mom for a couple of months, and I know there's clearly some anxiety there, but does it also take the pressure off?
Oh, that's funny. When it first happened, the first week or two, I was like, oh, it's nice not to be running up to the nursing home, every other day. Because basically that would be anywhere from 4 hours to the whole day, depending on how things went. And so for the first week or two, it definitely was a relief. And then it sort of became, all right, now I want to go see my mother and I can't. So yeah, it was a bit of a relief, but not so much anymore. One of the things about this experience that might be interesting for for your listeners of the podcast was whether you're going to be caring for them at home or whether they're going to go in a nursing home. You do have to talk about a living will. You do have to talk about what they want to have done with their estate. You have to find it. I had one when my mother was in the hospital at one point. And the thing I should tell you about my mother is, even though she's 94 and has dementia and wants you to believe she's deaf and weighs 87 pounds, her sense of humor has remained intact. During one hospital visit, before she went up to the nursing home, we're talking to the social worker at the hospital. I'm sitting there. My mother is sitting there. The social worker is there. The social worker says, well, Mr. McCarty, if you aren't able to make your own medical decisions, who do you want to make your medical decisions for you? My mother says, I can make my own medical decision. Yes, well, Mr. McCarty, if you couldn't make your own medical decisions, who would you like to, your son is sitting right here, who would you like to make your medical decisions for? Why would I be unable to make my own medical decisions? And I'm sitting there, well, if you were asleep and you couldn't wake up, who would you want to make your own medical decisions for you? She looked and she says, Trump. And I cracked up because, my mother's no fan of Trump and the social worker didn't know what to make of it. But it was just, but you do need to have that stuff straightened out. In getting my mother into a nursing home, we hired an elder attorney, and which really helped in guiding through the labyrinth of rules and regulations you have to deal with. For me, I'm an only child, and my parents split up before I was born. So this really all fell on me and my wife to some degree. And it's incredibly difficult and painful. And as you say, there is never quite enough. No. You just have to hope you do the best. I look back and I sort of think that somewhere in her 80s, what I thought of as being eccentricities perhaps became a bit more, for instance, she got more junk mail than anybody. It started to pile up, and I wasn't visiting her as much then because she was 80 and everything and functioning very well. And she refused to let me do anything about it. She said, no, leave it alone. I can't deal. I can't. Yeah. So one day I finally said, this is a problem. It's taking over every surface. You're starting to put it on the stove. This is not a good idea. And I finally decided to just get rid of it. I think there were like 16 bags of junk mail ultimately. And I had to go through it piece by piece because every once in a while there'd be a check from her union. And she anything that would cure anything, she was willing to take. She was willing to try. This will cure cancer, flatulence, erectile dysfunction, everything. She'd order it and then usually never take it. So there was junk mail, and then there was tons of unopened vials of pills that came from God only knows where. And, it's that odd thing where you go, you're wasting tons of money on this crap And then you come to the day when you go, well, Medicaid's going to take it anyway. I look back on that, I wound up looking back and going, well, that was the beginning of a cognitive decline. She wound up weighing about 90 pounds, and she's about 87 now, and yet she thought she was fat. Oh, I don't want to get fat. You're in your 80s. You're not supposed to have the dietary afflictions of a teenage girl. So there were things like that. And then, here was the one that really did it. There was a night that and this was not too long before she wound up going to the nursing home, maybe about a year. But she told me she had a big apartment. She had 2 bathrooms in her apartment. It was the apartment I grew up in. And she told me that she had to get up, that she would get up in the middle of the night and she would have to walk to the other bathroom because she saw the shadow or something of people in the bathroom closer, that was right off of her room. And I remember saying to her, I said, well, Mom, now, look, you're telling me this. It's 2 PM. You do understand there weren't people in your bathroom last night. Well, you weren't there. And indeed, I wasn't. But as far as she was concerned, somebody was in there. She didn't know how they got there, where they went during the day, but they should have been paying rent at the very least. But at that, that was the point at which I started to think, oh boy, Houston, we have a problem. It's painful to see that kind of thing happening. Sobering moment when you get the power of attorney. And you obviously know the other thing, that I would tell to people, and it's the most obvious thing in the world is that, and you were talking about this before, when your parents or anyone that anyone that you love goes in a hospital or an institution, you have to establish a presence there. You have to let them know that somebody's watching, which is part of what makes this so difficult, is that I can't go there and watch. Right. I speak to them on the phone, but it's not the same. I bet your folks have said this also. And it's such a poignant, sad moment when she says, I never thought I'd get this far. I never thought I would be like this. Our lives are now have another big division in them. There's the personal ones like pre-comedy, post-comedy, during comedy, whatever. And then there's the big ones we all share. There's the world before 9/11, and now there's the world before this. My mother wound up in a nursing home because it was clear to me that her issues suddenly went past the point where I could possibly deal with them, because They were physical, they were emotional, they were cognitive, there was hearing, and I've never had the conversation with her yet where I said, this is it, you're here. And they advised that if you don't think it's a good idea to have that conversation, you're probably right. Probably not a good idea, because she might just forget anyway, and it might just depress her. But the thing I would say in terms of what, you need to get that power of attorney before they start to lose the ability to give informed consent on it. Because if you're dealing with someone who sort of lost it, they may not let you have it. And then you're going to be at the mercy of the system. And then you're going to really lose all control. And you don't want that to happen. And just paying attention to their condition and how they seem to be. But really get that power of attorney and get the will straightened out.
Yes.
You don't want to leave that up in the air. People need to know on all sides what's going on. A lot of people let that stuff go, and it's really not a good idea to let that kind of stuff go. I encountered a really weird thing during the whole run-up of getting her ready. The elder care lawyer had me finding all these documents. I had to go down the hall of records and get her birth certificate. And that was complicated by the fact that when my mother was in her early 20s, she legally changed her name and never changed it back. And that would have been a real problem if I hadn't I came across some documents that I didn't know about that pointed me towards the fact that she'd done it. And so I was able to get her original birth certificate because I knew the name she changed it to. But then when she got married, then that became her name. So that sort of straighten things out for me. But if I had not had a hint going into it that my mother had changed her name, I could have had a real problem. I don't think that's an issue for most people. Oh, my parents changed their name and never told me. That whole process was an unending nightmare. I mean, once I got an elder care lawyer, it was like a mythical quest for paperwork. Everything had to happen. You know, this had to happen within 2 days, and something else had to happen within 3 days. And these deadlines that would come into play, and my mother had a series of some small strokes over the years, big ones, but she had issues with language where she will frequently be trying to find the right word, and she won't be able to find the right word for something. So my cousin was visiting her at the nursing home, and she's sitting in her room, and she's saying, well, one of the things I like about being here is that I'm right close to the, and she's indicating towards it. She wants to say bathroom, and she can't come up with the word bathroom. She says, I'm right close to the library. And then she realizes it's the bathroom. And okay, 2 minutes later, a nurse walks in. My mother says, oh, and here comes the librarian. There's this wonderful acceptance of the fact that she has these issues. But my favorite story, and this is from years ago, this is my favorite Maryland story. So ages ago, it was Easter. This story is like, this story happened like 40 years ago. So we go over to, there was a house in Hollis, really Hollis. I mean, before Run DMC came from Hollis, there was a house in Hollis that was like sort of the Palmer family central. And we went over there for Easter. And one year there was her cousin, my godfather, was greeting everybody very, very sanctimoniously, very piously. Happy Easter, Christ is risen. Every person you see, we go, Happy Easter, Christ is risen. My mother, Happy Easter, Christ is risen. She takes a perfectly timed beat and she shoots back, you can't keep a good man down. My mother could have been a comic. I got my entire sense of humor from her, and my understanding is she got it from her, my grandmother, who I never got to know. But that thing was apparently passed down from generation to generation. I remember meeting your father one time at the comic strip, and he was very dapper, very elegant. He was very impeccably stylish and put together and charming. I remember him quite well. And you seem very proud of him. You've been such a good daughter to your parents, and we had some wonderful conversations about this stuff. So I'm glad to have one that will sort of be immortalized for posterity.
Bill, thank you so much for spending some time with me and people with parents.
You are more than welcome, Leanne.
Thanks for listening to People with Parents. Please share the podcast with your friends and family and leave a review on iTunes. People with Parents is lived, written, and produced by stand-up comedian, author, and keynote speaker Leanne Lord. Visit her at veryfunnylady.com. And remember, we make them parents. They make us people. Crazy people.